We all know of rabies, but a lot of us, including me, are ignorant to how horrific it truly is. Rabies is a much feared disease, often considered one of the most terrifying diseases we know of. This fear stems from the exceptionally aggressive nature of its symptoms and the almost certain fatal outcome if left untreated.
On the third day of the disease, he displays a characteristic restlessness and agitation. The most familiar clinical symptom of rabies is associated with difficulty in swallowing. When fluid comes in contact with the throat, it is violently expelled, at the same time producing painful, spasmodic muscular contractions. The accessory muscles of respiration are also affected by the attempt to swallow, so that the patient chokes and gasps for air. In order to avoid swallowing, he drools accumulated saliva into a cup. There is excessive perspiration, and the pupils are dilated. As a precaution against the convulsions which commonly occur in rabies, the patient is secured hand and foot. He displays increasing agitation and delirium. The patient becomes quieter. He lapses into a coma, which is followed, inevitably, by death.
In some popular discussions, the disease has been compared to a kind of zombification. This is because of how the virus manipulates the host's behavior, causing agitation and aggression, sometimes biting other people, which facilitates the spread of the virus. However, the comparison to zombies is a dramatic exaggeration. While the aggression of the infected is shocking, it is not relentless, mindless attacks seen in fictional zombies. Additionally, transmission from a bite, although common in infected animals, is much less common in human rabies cases. This difference is probably due to the behavioral differences. Unlike many mammals, humans do not typically use a bite as a defense strategy. While there are superficial similarities between descriptions of zombies and symptoms of rabies, these comparisons are primarily sensational. Despite this, the importance of rabies and its terrible effects on those infected cannot be denied. Its ability to cause rapid deterioration of behavior and physical health and high mortality makes it a serious problem in areas where it's prevalent. Rabies is classified as a violent virus because of its more severe symptoms. Due to its global impact, rabies remains a major public health problem, causing up to 70,000 people to pass away each year. It mostly spreads from animals to humans, although some cases of human-to-human transmission, such as through organ transplants, have been reported. These cases are extremely rare, although it can infect and cause disease in multiple tissues. Its primary target is the nervous system, which is why it is often so difficult to treat and progresses rapidly. Bats are a particular concern in the spread due to their mobility and wide distribution. Though due to their proximity to humans, dogs are considered the main source of human rabies cases, accounting to up to 99% of all human rabies infections, though cats and cows can also be responsible. I cannot imagine a violent deceased cow. Although characterized as a fast-acting virus, rabies follows a deceptive trajectory after initial infection. It slowly manipulates in the muscle tissue of the bite site. During this period, an infected person may have no detectable symptoms. This stage can last from days to years, which contributes to the unpredictable nature of rabies incubation phase. That is terrifying that years after a bite you can get rabies. However, once the virus enters the nervous system, its effects become more intense. The first symptoms may appear as numbness and tingling at the bite site, which indicates that the virus has entered the nervous system, after which the disease is virtually 100% fatal. You will not only die, but you will suffer the entire time. The critical movement in the progression of the disease is when the virus reaches the spinal cord, which is part of the central nervous system. From there, it reaches a direct path to the brain. The speed with which the virus reaches the brain depends significantly on the location of the bite. Bites closer to the head accelerate the virus's journey to the brain, as it has a shorter distance to travel. The average incubation period is 1 to 3 months. It causes devastating neurological symptoms and is fatal if untreated. This emphasizes the importance of immediate treatment if it even is suspected. If a bat even comes close to you, seek medical attention. That terrifies me because in a few years I won't be on my mother's health insurance anymore, and I hope to God in 3.5 years from now I will have quit my job, moved out, and will be focusing on video creation and things that make me happy. Who knows, maybe my mother will kick me off of her health insurance before then. It's up to future me to decide if I will buy health insurance or just simply die in this situation. Here is a video of a man who refused the anti-rabies vaccination after being bitten. Reddit user Blue Krabby DC says, speaking as someone who was bitten by a dog and had to go through the whole rabies series as a teenager, it is incredibly painful. They use a large diameter needle to administer large amounts of the vaccine mixture around all of the bite area and deep into the muscle tissue of both shoulders and both thighs in order to get that large amount of fluid into the muscle tissue, and they basically jab the needles in as deep as they will go, and the amount of fluid is painful too. This is repeated the next day, 2 days later, 4 days later, a week later, 2 weeks later, and a month later. I had my dad by my side while I went through it, and to this day he doesn't like to talk about it because of how hard it was to watch me go through. All that being said, I'm extremely thankful I did not get sick and that my community requires people receive the rabies series if they are bitten by an unidentified mammal. Though it was asked if this happened decades ago, as modern treatment is not that painful. User The Reptilian Agenda says, I give rabies shots for a living, ER nurse, and it's not like this. We use the same needles as the flu shot and go as deep. We still give it over a 2-week course, but I give it to kids. They know what the last shot was like and they usually complain, but no one ever freaks out due to pain. The medicine is hot pink, so that usually helps distract everyone, lol. When the rabies virus reaches the brain, its detrimental effects become pronounced. It spreads rapidly, causing the brain to swell. This interferes with normal brain function, causing a variety of symptoms, including significant neurological and behavioral changes. The first symptoms, such as fever, headache, and general weakness, can often resemble the flu. As the disease progresses, the infected may experience anxiety, confusion, agitation, and insomnia. There also may be unusually high levels of aggression, a symptom that sharply reflects the deteriorating state of the brain. One of the most terrible symptoms of rabies is paralysis, which usually begins at the site of the bite and gradually spreads to other parts of the body. Rabies can appear in two forms, furious and paralytic. Furious, the most common, is characterized by hyperactivity, impulsive behavior, and fear of water. In contrast, paralytic rabies is less dramatic but just as deadly, causing muscle weakness and eventually paralysis. Once the rabies virus has wreaked havoc in the brain, it begins to destroy the rest of the body. It travels from the central nervous system, reaching various organs and tissues. The salivary glands are mainly affected, which is a critical factor in the spread of the virus, as it allows the virus to be transmitted through bites. As the virus manipulates the body, it travels along the nerves to the salivary glands, which triggers hypersecretion of saliva, making it a primary source of transmission. It causes spasms in the esophagus, preventing swallowing of saliva, increasing the possibility of transmission through saliva exchange. The condition of the infected person worsens as the virus spreads. Symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain may occur, as well as abnormal heartbeats or breathing problems. Victims may sometimes suffer from hyperactivity and hallucinations. Eventually, the person may fall into a coma. Death usually follows a few days after this, usually from respiratory failure. In animals, the rabies virus manipulates the behavior of the host to encourage its spread. Infected animals show increased symptoms of infection and perhaps show agitation and increased tendency to bite, which is how the virus is most often spread. One of the most common symptoms of infection, and perhaps one of the most misunderstood, is fear of water. It is not a psychological fear, but a physical reaction. In the infected, attempts to drink water or even the sight or sound of water can cause severe painful throat spasms because the virus's impacts on the esophagus. In this video posted to Reddit by Necroed of a video showing symptoms of hydrophobia.
ना ना वो कौन सा टोपी आप कौन तो ले आओ टोपी ना पानी पी शाबाश पानी पी पानी पी वो ना खाने उनके तो छोटे बता तो पानी पिया ना पी पी शाबाश 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 वो ना के मारे ना पी बोला पी पला इकड़ा 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 इकड़ा
He is seen managing to take a sip of water. The poster says he is probably painfully, torturously thirsty, but the rabies virus is concentrated in saliva, so it makes you unable to swallow. Even though the thought of water or drinking can cause painful muscle spasms in the throat as the disease progresses, so he wants the water, but when he goes to drink it, his throat closes, his muscles cramp, and he can't. This way, he can't wash away the virus, and you are more likely to pass on the virus. User Independent Device 722 says saliva from an infected human or animal can also transmit rabies if the saliva comes into contact with the eyes, mouth, or nose. I hope his father was informed. He is in high risk here kissing the child. Butthead responds, he's holding his dying kid. He's not thinking of himself in that moment, mate. Also, a reminder that human-to-human transmission is rare.
पी जाओ विठल का पिवड़ाओ पानी पिवड़ाओ विठल का हमने हाथ में आपो पियो पिवड़ाओ पियो
नहीं होता
एक महीने में अपना
ना
95% of cases occur in Africa and Asia due to underreporting and uncertain estimates. 70,000 cases a year is likely to be greatly underestimated. The burden of the disease is disproportionately affects the poor rural population, and about half of the cases are children under the age of 15. The summer of 2017, 8-year-old Raymond found a sick puppy lying in the family's front yard that seemed to need help. He decided to bring the puppy inside to feed it. The puppy suddenly bit his right hand. The bite was not very serious, but there was some bleeding. He told his parents about the incident, but they waved him off. The puppy passed away the next day. The father left the body in a nearby dump. They forgot about it until 2 months later. Raymond developed a fever, muscle aches all over his body, and severe pain in his right arm. He was taken to a hospital. Then he had problems drinking water. He was shaking even seeing water. 5 days after arriving at the hospital, Raymond passed away. He was a victim of rabies, suspecting to be the deadliest infectious disease. It remains a major public health problem in the Philippines, although the disease is unheard of in Singapore, Japan, and other industrialized countries. 200 to 300 Filipinos pass away from rabies every year. Despite the Rabies Act of 2007, which aims to eradicate rabies in the Philippines by 2020, it is a highly misunderstood disease among Filipinos, especially those living in rural areas. Some believe that garlic and a few drops of vinegar can cure rabies. I would love to know a Filipino's opinion on this. Someone who knows better than I do. I'm not optimistic it's true. The government launched the National Rabies Prevention and Control Program in 2007, which includes mass vaccinations of dogs, creation of a database system of registered dogs, impounding of stray and unvaccinated dogs, and awareness and education campaign on rabies prevention and control. Pre-exposure treatment for high-risk individuals and post-exposure treatment for those bitten, and encourages responsible pet ownership. In 1855, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle reported a new husband taking the life of a bride. The story takes place in Royal France, where the woman's parents initially prevented the couple from getting engaged due to the oddities sometimes observed in the young man. Even though he was otherwise the best match, the parents eventually consented and the couple got married. Shortly after, horrific screams were heard coming from their bedroom. People arrived quickly and found the poor girl clinging to life in agony, her breast torn in the most hideous manner and covered with the blood of the man in a raving madness who had eaten part of the chest of the unfortunate girl. The bride passed away a short time later. Her husband also passed away after violent resistance. What could have caused this terrible event? Then it was remembered that the groom had been bitten by a strange dog. The transfer of madness from a dog to a human seemed the only possible reason for the terrible turn of events. The Eagle described the episode as a sad and distressing case of hydrophobia, or rabies as it's called today. But the account was like a gothic horror story. It was basically a werewolf story. The bite of a mad dog caused a terrible metamorphosis, turning the human victim into a vicious monster whose brutal impulses led to obscene and disgusting violence. The story highlighted the fine line between human and animal. Rabies was feared as it was capable of turning people into raging beasts. Historian Eugene Weber observed that French peasants in the 1800s feared above all wolves. mad dogs and fire, canine madness, or the disease we know today as rabies, created nightmares of dogs for centuries. Other infectious diseases, including cholera and typhus, took the lives of far more people in the 19th and 20th centuries. However, the cry of mad dog created an immediate sense of fear. A mere dog bite could mean prolonged suffering followed by certain passing. Modern medicine knows that rabies is caused by a virus, but they did not know this centuries ago. It is thought that the legend of werewolves and vampires came from early rabies cases. The loss of bodily control and rationality caused by rabies seemed like an attack on the victim's humanity. It transformed humans into monsters. Newspapers often describe dog bite victims as barking and growling, while cat bite victims scratched and hissed. According to folk medicine, victims of dog bites can protect themselves against mad dog disease by killing the dog that has bitten them, or by spreading the fur of the offending dog on the wound, or by cutting off its tail. In the connection of vampires and rabies victims, distorted voices, exaggerated facial expressions, restlessness, wild and aggressive behavior that makes sufferers appear more monstrous than human, extreme sensitivity to light, violent reaction from looking into a mirror. In various Eastern European folklores, vampires did not transform into bats, but into wolves or dogs. Of 29 survivors of rabies, these are the only known survivors with data since the 1970s of tens of thousands of people being infected each year, made complete recoveries, all of with supported care. 4 had mild effects of the disease after the initial illness period. 4 had moderate after effects. 14 had severe after effects. 2 have unknown status. 1 survived in the hospital but passed away later due to leaving against medical advice. Of those who survived, 5 had no post-exposure vaccination. 3 made complete recoveries, and 2 had mild after effects. The majority of these survivors were from India and got the disease from a dog bite. Gianna Gessi survived rabies in 2004. She was placed in a medically induced coma after developing rabies symptoms and was released 2.5 months later, rabies-free, but with reduced cognitive and motor skills. She recovered a lot over the next few years and later became a teacher and a mother. The same treatment was attempted on several other patients with varying success rates. The idea behind the treatment was that even if the virus attacks your brain, victims usually pass away from suffocation, either drowning in saliva or constant spasms of the diaphragm. Your immune system starts to fight the virus, but if you don't get the vaccine, your immune system doesn't get the chance to fight the virus until the symptoms start. It will definitely be too late at that point. The idea of coma treatment was to allow the body to live without the impulses of the central nervous system, which work the heart and lungs, so that the immune system has time to fight it. It worked for Gianna. Reddit user Grim Reaper 006 tells their story of being infected as a child in India. I was bitten by a rabid dog when I was around 6 years old. Of course, the hospital had no shots available and could obtain them only after 2 days. My parents were informed of its availability in a military hospital in Kalimpong, a town in the Darjeeling Hills 2 hours away. What complicated matters was that the region was in the grips of a bloody and violent Gorkhaland agitation, and our state, Sikkim, was completely cut off from the rest of the country. Fortunately, we traveled in an ambulance and were escorted a safe passage by all belligerents in the conflict. I practically remember the ambulance driver humoring me by letting me pull the knob that sounded the siren. Made the trip 2 times until the 3rd day when the vaccine arrived in my hometown. Took 17 to 18 shots on the stomach and felt like a bunch of marbles around the belly button. Years later, my father had the whole family get rabies shots when we learnt the cow whose milk we were being supplied with had been bitten by a rabid dog.